Okay, just picture this for a second. It's a beautiful summer afternoon. You're on vacation walking through the incredible gardens of Versailles. And then something shifts. The world just feels different. And you realize you've walked right out of your own time and into the 18th century. Now this sounds like science fiction, right? But this is the real, incredible story told by two of Britain's most brilliant academics. And trust me, it might just change how you think about time itself.
See, this wasn't some campfire ghost story. This happened to two women with incredibly sharp, rigorously trained minds. So the real question we have to grapple with isn't just what did they see, but could it possibly actually have been real?
So to really get this story, you have to understand who the witnesses were, because these were absolutely not the kind of people given to making things up or flights of fancy. We're talking about formidable, disciplined academics at the very top of their game.
I mean, just look at their credentials. They are completely unimpeachable. On one hand, you have Annie Moberly, the first principal of St. Hugh's College at Oxford. And with her is Eleanor Jourdain, a brilliant historian, an expert on France who would actually go on to succeed Moberly. These were serious, highly respected people, the kind of witnesses you would absolutely trust in any other situation.
Okay, so their story kicks off on August 10th, 1901. They're just taking a walk, heading towards the Petit Trianon, that's Marie Antoinette's famous private chateau. And as they walked, the entire world around them began to subtly but completely change.
Eleanor Jourdain's own words just capture it perfectly. She said the atmosphere became heavy, oppressive. The light felt weird, and the world itself took on this flat, two-dimensional quality, almost like they'd walked onto a stage set. It was this deep, deep feeling that something was very, very wrong. And then they started to see people. Not shimmering ghosts, but solid-looking figures, all dressed in 18th century clothes. There were gardeners, officials, a woman in a white dress just sitting there sketching. But here's the most important part. Neither Moberly nor Jourdain said a single word to each other. They each saw these things in total silence, both assuming they were the only one experiencing it. And this is the detail that makes the whole story so unbelievably compelling. It wasn't until they were on the train heading home that they finally talked about it, and they were just floored. They had seen the same figures, felt the same heavy atmosphere, and noticed the same bizarre, out-of-place details. Their independent accounts were practically identical. Well, that deeply unsettling afternoon turned into a decade-long obsession for them. And being academics, they didn't just go around telling a spooky story. No, they launched a full-blown historical investigation to try and prove that what they saw had a real basis in fact.
And their research dug up something startling. You can see it right here on this timeline. The version of Versailles they had walked through was not the Versailles of 1901. It was the Versailles of 1789. They had described things in the garden that had actually been torn down more than 100 years earlier.
And their descriptions were incredibly specific. They talked about seeing an ornamental kiosk, a little decorative bridge, even a particular rock grotto. And get this, all of these features were later confirmed by digging up obscure 18th century maps. They were all real, and they were all long, long gone by 1901. So, how could they possibly know about things that weren't in any guidebook and hadn't existed for a century?
All of their research eventually led them to a single stunning conclusion. They believed the day they had experienced was October 5th, 1789. That's the exact day the revolutionary mob marched on Versailles. And that woman they saw sketching? They became convinced it was none other than Marie Antoinette herself, enjoying her final moments of peace before her entire world came crashing down.
Now, as absolutely incredible as their story was, it was still just that, a story. It was their word against 100 years of history. But, as it turns out, the garden itself was holding on to its own secrets, physical evidence that would take this from a strange tale to a truly profound mystery. Decades later, during some restoration work at Versailles, investigators actually started digging in the very spots the women described. And what they found in the ground, well, this is where the story gets truly unbelievable. Two major clues were unearthed. The first was the discovery of old, rotted timber stumps buried right where Jourdain remembered crossing that bridge that wasn't there. They were the physical remains of a structure that hadn't stood since the early 1800s.
But as wild as finding the old bridge post was, the second discovery, well, it defies every single conventional explanation. It is the one piece of the puzzle that just shouldn't exist. Workers found a pair of spectacle frames. Okay, so metallurgical analysis confirmed they were an authentic late 18th century design. And the location? They were found right where Moberly and Jourdain had walked. But here's the absolute kicker. Soil analysis showed they hadn't been buried in the ground for a century. They had been deposited recently.
So, what on earth is the rational explanation for all this? Over the years, skeptics have come up with several theories to try and debunk the whole incident, but every single one of them hits a major brick wall.
All right, let's just run through the skeptical takes. Could it have been some kind of historical reenactment or a pageant? Nope. Records show there was absolutely nothing scheduled that day. Okay, what about a shared hallucination? It's possible, I guess, but that doesn't explain how they hallucinated specific architectural details that were only confirmed by digging through dusty old archives. A false memory, then? Again, researchers have tried and failed to find any single source where they could have possibly learned all these obscure facts. At the end of the day, none of the normal explanations can account for everything they saw.
So when all the conventional explanations just don't work, you have to start looking at the more speculative theories. Theories that try to explain the whole thing, including that impossible pair of spectacles.
One really interesting idea is called the stone tape theory. It's this hypothesis that the stones of Versailles, which happened to be rich in quartz, literally recorded the intense emotional energy of the French Revolution. And maybe on that specific day in 1901, with just the right atmospheric conditions, Moberly and Jourdain basically walked into a playback of that recording.
It's a fascinating theory, for sure, but it has one massive hole. A psychic recording, no matter how vivid it is, cannot physically drop a pair of 18th-century spectacles into the ground in the 20th century. That requires something else entirely. So, what if it wasn't just a vision they saw?
And this is where we have to wade into some pretty cutting-edge physics. We know, for a fact, that in the quantum world, entangled particles can be connected instantly across huge distances. Physicists call it non-locality. It's real. So some theorists are asking, if space isn't the absolute barrier we think it is, why should time be? Could the past and the present somehow become entangled?
In a theory like that, temporal entanglement, the spectacles suddenly stop being a problem, and they become the single most important piece of evidence. They're not a paradox. They are the physical proof that a real, tangible exchange actually happened, that for just a few moments, the walls separating 1901 from 1789 became porous. And that leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling thought. The story of these two academics in a garden suggests that the past isn't some distant, sealed-off place. It might be right here, all around us, just separated by conditions we don't understand, waiting for the right moment to peek through. So if the past isn't really gone, then where exactly is it?